The year was 2387, and Jake Morrison sat in the most important meeting of his life. The crystalline walls of Kepler Station's main council chamber stretched high above him, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Each alien species had their own section of seats, designed for their unique body shapes. The insect-like Zentari clicked and buzzed in their hive formation, while the tall reptilian Corvins hissed softly to each other. Ambassador Morrison represented all of humanity in this vast chamber, and today he felt very small. Council Prime Vexithara rose from her elevated platform. Her massive insectoid form cast shadows across the chamber as her four arms gestured with practiced authority. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights like 1,000 tiny mirrors, and her mandibles clicked together as she prepared to speak. Morrison had dealt with many alien species during his 15 years as Earth's ambassador, but Vexithara still made him uncomfortable. She spoke for the Hive Collective, and her words carried the weight of billions of beings who thought as one mind. "Human Representative Morrison," Vexithara's voice echoed through the chamber's translation system. "Your species has been part of our galactic community for 43 standard years. We welcomed you with open arms when your first ships reached our borders. We shared our technology and our wisdom. We helped you establish colonies on 12 worlds and guided you through the complexities of interstellar politics." Morrison nodded politely, but his stomach was already twisting into knots. He knew this speech was leading somewhere bad. The emergency session had been called with only 6 hours' notice, and none of the usual diplomatic protocols had been followed. Something was very wrong. However, Vexithara continued, recent events have forced us to reconsider humanity's place in our peaceful alliance. Your species has shown a disturbing tendency toward violence and aggression. The border conflicts with the Corvin Empire last year demonstrated capabilities that concern many council members. Your military response was swift, decisive, and frankly terrifying to observe. Several alien delegates murmured their agreement. Morrison remembered those conflicts well. 3 Corvin fleets had attacked human colonies without warning, expecting easy victories against what they considered primitive humans. Instead, they found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned by Earth's military forces. The humans had not only defended their colonies, but had pushed deep into Corvin space before agreeing to peace talks. The galactic accords that govern our alliance clearly state that all member species must maintain the cosmic balance, Vexithara said, her voice growing colder. Your species fights with a ferocity that disturbs this balance. Your tactics are unconventional, and your weapons are designed for maximum destruction rather than minimal engagement. This cannot continue. Morrison felt his heart rate increase, but kept his face neutral. Years of diplomatic training had taught him to never show emotion during crucial negotiations. He glanced around the chamber and saw the same expression on every alien face. They had already made their decision before this meeting started. Therefore, Vexithara announced, the Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision regarding humanity's military forces. You have 6 standard months to surrender 90% of your fleet to Council authority. These ships will be decommissioned and their weapon systems destroyed. Your remaining forces will be limited to basic system defense and will operate under Council oversight. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Morrison felt like he had been punched in the stomach. 90% of Earth's fleet represented hundreds of ships and millions of trained personnel. It was essentially everything except the home defense forces around Earth itself. Furthermore, Vexithara continued, all human military installations outside your home system must be dismantled within the same time frame. Your weapons research programs will be terminated and all advanced military technology will be transferred to Council oversight. These measures are necessary to ensure continued peace in our galaxy. Morrison finally stood up, his legs feeling weak but his voice steady. Prime Vexithara, this is a significant request that requires careful consideration by Earth's government. I cannot make such commitments without proper consultation. This is not a request, Ambassador Morrison, Vexithera replied sharply. This is a requirement for continued membership in the Galactic Council. Failure to comply will result in immediate economic sanctions, the closure of all trade routes to human space, and eventual expulsion from Council territory. Your species will be declared a rogue element and treated accordingly. The threat was clear. Without access to galactic trade routes and technology, humanity would be isolated and vulnerable. Earth's colonies depended on materials and equipment that could only be obtained through Council-controlled suppliers. Economic sanctions would cripple human civilization within months. Morrison nodded slowly and activated his personal communication device. I will transmit your requirements to Earth immediately. When do you need our formal response? You have 72 hours to provide written acceptance of these terms, Vexithera said. The 6-month countdown begins when that acceptance is received. We trust that humanity will make the wise choice and embrace a more peaceful future. The meeting ended with formal pleasantries, but Morrison barely heard them. His mind was already racing ahead to the conversation he would need to have with Earth's leadership. As the various alien delegates filed out of the chamber, many of them looked at him with expressions that mixed pity with satisfaction. They genuinely believed they were saving the galaxy from humanity's violent nature. Morrison gathered his materials and walked slowly toward his quarters. In 3 hours, he would send an encrypted message that would change everything. Earth's government had been preparing for this moment since the first day humans set foot in galactic politics. The Council had just made their biggest mistake. 3 months had passed since the Council delivered their ultimatum, and the galaxy watched with growing satisfaction as human ships began arriving at surrender points throughout Council space. The aliens felt vindicated in their decision as reports came in daily of human compliance with the disarmament orders. Military vessels that had once terrorized Corvan fleets now sat quietly in designated zones awaiting destruction. The message seemed clear. Humanity had accepted their place as a junior member of galactic civilization. Captain Lisa Harper stood on the bridge of the UES Valor and watched as Zentari inspectors crawled over every surface of her ship. The massive dreadnought had served humanity for 22 years and had seen action in 7 different conflicts. Now alien technicians were systematically documenting every weapon system before ordering their removal and destruction. Harper maintained a professional expression while internally counting the hidden compartments that the Zentari had completely missed. Inspector Quintel approached Harper with his datapad in hand. The Zentari's compound eyes reflected the bridge, lighting as he spoke through his translation device. Captain Harper, your vessel's specifications are most impressive. We admit that human engineering, while crude compared to our biotechnology, shows remarkable effectiveness in combat applications. It seems almost wasteful to destroy such capable machinery. Harper nodded politely and gestured toward the main weapons array. The Valor has served us well, Inspector. We understand the Council's concerns about maintaining galactic peace. If dismantling our weapons helps achieve that goal, then we accept the sacrifice. What Quintel did not realize was that the weapons he was documenting had been replaced weeks earlier with elaborate replicas. The real armaments were currently being installed on ships that existed in no official records. The Valor's true firepower had been quietly transferred to vessels hidden in the deep space construction yards that the Council knew nothing about. Meanwhile, on the desert world of Xerion, Commander Alex Turner supervised the transfer of human ground forces equipment to Corvan military officials. Crates of rifles, artillery pieces, and ammunition were being loaded onto Corvan transport vehicles under the watchful eyes of reptilian soldiers. The Corvan seemed pleased with humanity's cooperation, and several officers had complimented Turner on his professionalism during the handover process. General Kraktar, the Corvan field commander, examined one of the human rifles with obvious interest. These weapons show clever design principles, he hissed through his translator. Your species may be primitive in many ways, but your talent for creating tools of war is undeniable. Perhaps there are lessons we can learn from human military engineering." Turner smiled and offered to demonstrate the rifle's features. What he did not mention was that every weapon being surrendered was manufactured 47 years ago and had been scheduled for replacement even before the Council's ultimatum. The ammunition looked identical to current stocks, but contained subtle modifications that would make the weapons unreliable after extended use. The Corvins were essentially receiving expensive museum pieces disguised as cutting-edge military hardware. Deep beneath Earth's oceans, far from the sensors of orbiting Council monitoring stations, massive construction projects continued around the clock. Admiral Kate Sullivan descended in a specialized submarine to visit Facility 7, one of 12 underwater shipyards that had been operating in complete secrecy for the past 8 years. The facility stretched for kilometers along the ocean floor, hidden beneath thermal layers that confused scanning equipment. Chief Engineer Bobby Price met Sullivan at the airlock and escorted her through the facility's main corridor. Through reinforced windows, they could see the skeletal framework of ships that dwarfed anything in humanity's official fleet. Workers in environmental suits moved like tiny insects around the massive construction projects, welding hull plates, and installing systems that represented the latest in human military technology. "How many vessels are currently under construction?" Sullivan asked as they paused beside the dry dock containing the UES Retribution. Price consulted his tablet and smiled. 17 are completed and undergoing final testing, Admiral. 43. More are in various stages of construction. At current production rates, we'll have a full battle fleet ready for deployment within 6 months. The Council wanted 90% of our fleet. They can have every ship they know about. Sullivan studied the Retribution's sleek hull design and nodded approvingly. The ship incorporated stealth technology that would make it nearly invisible to Council sensors while carrying more firepower than 3 traditional dreadnoughts. Every system had been designed with one goal in mind: defeating Council forces if diplomacy failed. Back on Kepler Station, Ambassador Morrison continued his role as the defeated human representative. He attended daily briefings where Council officials discussed how best to integrate a pacified humanity into their vision of galactic society. The condescension was thick during every meeting as various species offered suggestions for humanity's future role. "Perhaps we should assign human colonies to established species for guidance," suggested Ambassador Veltran of the aquatic Nereid Collective. "Humans clearly lack the wisdom necessary for independent governance. With proper supervision, they could become productive members of galactic society." Morrison nodded thoughtfully and took careful notes. His cybernetic implant recorded every word while simultaneously analyzing the speaker's body language and vocal patterns. The intelligence gathered during these meetings was proving invaluable for understanding each species' military capabilities and strategic weaknesses. The aliens' arrogance was causing them to reveal far more than they realized. During a private moment in his quarters, Morrison reviewed the latest intelligence reports from Earth. The surrender process was proceeding exactly according to plan. Every ship being handed over to Council forces contained hidden monitoring devices and remote detonation charges. When the time came, humanity would not only reveal their secret fleet, but would simultaneously cripple the Council's newly acquired arsenal. Dr. Nina Clark worked late into the night in her laboratory deep within Colorado's Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Her team had made breakthrough discoveries in quantum physics that the galactic scientific community considered purely theoretical. The aliens believed that certain technologies were impossible to achieve without centuries of careful development. They had no idea that human scientists approached problems with a reckless creativity that often led to unexpected solutions. "The quantum disruptor array is ready for field testing," Clark reported during her weekly briefing to Admiral Sullivan. "One properly placed shot can disable all electronic systems within a star system. The Council species won't understand what happened until it's far too late to respond." The beauty of humanity's plan was becoming clear to everyone involved in the deception. Every act of apparent compliance was actually a strategic move that strengthened Earth's position. The Council believed they were witnessing humanity's submission, when they were actually watching the opening moves of the most elaborate military deception in galactic history. Ambassador Morrison had perfected the art of looking defeated, while Council delegates discussed humanity's future with casual indifference. The weekly sessions on Kepler Station had become exercises in controlled rage as various alien species debated how best to manage their newly pacified human subjects. Morrison sat quietly in his assigned chair, taking notes and nodding at appropriate moments while his cybernetic implant recorded every careless word that revealed Council military secrets. "The humans show promise as agricultural workers," declared Diplomat Yershan of the plant-like Verdani Collective. Her massive flower head swayed as she spoke, releasing spores that served as pheromone communication to her fellow Verdani. "Their physical strength and endurance could prove valuable in our biofarms. With proper guidance, they might achieve acceptable productivity levels within a few generations." Council Prime Vexithara clicked her approval. "The Verdani proposal has merit. Human colonies could be redistributed to serve existing Council agricultural needs. Their violent tendencies might be channeled into more productive activities under appropriate supervision." Morrison smiled politely and made another note while internally cataloging the defensive capabilities that Yershan had inadvertently revealed. The Verdani biofarms were apparently protected by living defensive organisms that responded to pheromone commands. This information would prove invaluable when human forces needed to neutralize Verdani installations quickly and efficiently. Ambassador Krixnall of the Energy-Based Plasma Collective offered his own suggestion through the Chamber's translation, Matrix. "Human neural patterns show interesting complexity. Perhaps they could serve as organic processing units for complex calculations. Their brains demonstrate remarkable pattern recognition abilities that could supplement our quantum computing networks." The casual discussion of using humans as biological computers sent a chill down Morrison's spine, but he maintained his diplomatic composure. Every species in the Council apparently had their own ideas about humanity's proper place in the galactic hierarchy. None of those ideas involved treating humans as equals. Meanwhile, on Earth, the real preparations continued to accelerate beyond anything the Council could imagine. Dr. Nina Clark stood in the main laboratory of the Cheyenne Mountain Research Complex, watching as her team conducted the final tests on technologies that officially did not exist. The quantum disruptor cannon had exceeded all performance expectations during preliminary trials and was ready for deployment to strategic locations throughout human space. The targeting system can lock onto any electronic signature within a 15 light-year radius, Clark explained to Admiral Sullivan during their weekly briefing. "One shot disables everything from personal communicators to planetary defense grids. The effect cascades through quantum entanglement, so even shielded systems become vulnerable once the initial disruption begins." Sullivan studied the technical readouts with professional interest. The weapon represented a completely new approach to space warfare that no Council species would understand until it was far too late. "How many units can we deploy before the deadline?" 37 are currently in production, Clark replied. "We can have them installed and operational within 4 months. The Council will never see them coming because they don't believe such technology is possible." In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, what appeared to be routine mining operations concealed the most ambitious construction project in human history. Tony Rodriguez supervised the excavation crews that were hollowing out massive asteroids and converting them into kinetic bombardment platforms. Each installation would be capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed using magnetic rail systems powered by fusion reactors. The mining ships that visited these locations regularly carried legitimate cargo manifests that satisfied Council inspection teams. What the aliens did not realize was that the industrial equipment being transported actually consisted of weapons components designed to turn ordinary asteroids into planet-killing artillery pieces. The scale of the deception required precise coordination between hundreds of seemingly unrelated operations. Rodriguez received his daily briefing from Luna Base through encrypted quantum communications that the Council monitoring systems could not detect. Lieutenant Sarah Kim coordinated the schedules to ensure that every phase of the construction remained hidden from alien sensors while maintaining the appearance of normal commercial activity. Installation 43 is ready for final testing, Kim reported during the morning briefing. All railgun components are operational and the targeting computers have been calibrated. We can put a tungsten rod through the center of a small moon from 12 light-years away. The psychological impact of the kinetic bombardment platforms would be enormous once they were revealed. Council species had grown accustomed to energy-based weapons and defensive shields designed to deflect plasma bolts or particle beams. None of their defenses were designed to stop solid projectiles traveling at relativistic velocities. Captain Lisa Harper completed her final inspection of the UES Valor as Zentari technicians finished dismantling the last of the ship's apparent weapon systems. The aliens had been thorough in their documentation and destruction of everything they could find. What they had missed were the modular weapon pods that could be attached to the ship's hull within minutes when needed. Inspector Quintel approached Harper with obvious satisfaction as he completed his final report. Captain, your cooperation during this process has been exemplary. The Council appreciates humanity's willingness to embrace a more peaceful approach to galactic relations. Perhaps your species will find greater happiness in pursuits other than warfare. Harper nodded respectfully, while mentally reviewing the ship's hidden capabilities. The Valor might look defenseless to Council observers, but hidden throughout the vessel were weapons systems that could be activated and deployed faster than any alien crew could react. The ship's true armament was simply waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The deception extended to every level of human military operations. Commander Alex Turner had completed the transfer of obsolete weapons to Corvan forces on Zerion, but his real mission was just beginning. The tracking devices hidden within every surrendered weapon were now providing detailed intelligence about Corvan military installations and deployment patterns. When the time came, human forces would know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. General Kraktar continued to express admiration for human weapon design as his troops integrated the surrendered equipment into their arsenal. Your engineers understand the principles of battlefield effectiveness, he told Turner during their final meeting. Perhaps when your species has learned proper discipline, we might collaborate on military technology development. Turner smiled and thanked the general for his kind words while reviewing the intelligence data flowing in from the hidden sensors. Every Corvan military facility that received human weapons was now effectively under surveillance. The aliens had unknowingly allowed humanity to place monitoring devices throughout their entire military infrastructure. Back on Earth, Admiral Sullivan reviewed the latest progress reports from installations throughout the solar system. The scope of humanity's preparations was staggering in its complexity and ambition. Every apparent act of compliance with Council demands actually strengthened Earth's strategic position while weakening the aliens' ability to respond effectively. Phase 3 is complete ahead of schedule, reported Colonel Ryan Brooks during the evening briefing. All surrender operations are proceeding normally from the Council's perspective. They have no idea that we're actually redeploying our forces to more advantageous positions while giving them worthless equipment to destroy. Sullivan nodded and turned her attention to the intelligence summaries from Ambassador Morrison's activities on Kepler Station. The aliens' casual discussions of humanity's future were providing invaluable insight into Council military capabilities and strategic thinking. The Council's arrogance is working in our favor. They're revealing weaknesses they don't even know they have. The final phase of the deception would begin in just 3 months when the surrender deadline arrived. Everything was proceeding exactly according to the plan that humanity had been developing since their first contact with galactic civilization. The Council had made the mistake of underestimating the species that had conquered the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy. The 6-month deadline had arrived, and the Galactic Council prepared to celebrate what they considered their greatest diplomatic victory in centuries. Kepler Station buzzed with activity as representatives from all 12 Council species gathered for the formal ceremony where humanity would permanently accept their diminished status in galactic society. The pacification accords had been prepared with elaborate care, written in 17 different languages, to ensure that no human could claim misunderstanding of the terms. Council Prime Vexithera personally oversaw the final military preparations, as 67 Council enforcement vessels spread throughout the Sol system to conduct what she termed routine verification sweeps. The massive fleet represented the combined naval power of 4 different species and carried enough firepower to sterilize Earth's entire surface if humanity proved foolish enough to resist at this late stage. Admiral Zekthul, report on your inspection findings, Vexithera commanded from her flagship's bridge as the Zentari enforcement fleet completed its scan of human space. The tactical officer's mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he reviewed his sensors. Prime Vexithera, our deep scans detect no significant military presence beyond the minimal defensive forces agreed upon in the Accords. Human compliance appears complete. Their orbital platforms show only standard civilian traffic control systems, and their remaining ships are limited to basic patrol vessels. Vexithera nodded approvingly while studying the tactical displays. Everything indicated that humanity had accepted their fate with surprising grace. Perhaps the humans were more intelligent than the Council had originally believed. Some species required military action to accept their proper place in galactic society, but the humans seemed to understand the futility of resistance against superior numbers and technology. Excellent work, Admiral, Vexithera replied. Maintain standard patrol patterns, but do not interfere with civilian traffic. Today marks the beginning of a new era of peace in our galaxy. The ceremonial chamber on Kepler Station had been decorated with symbols representing all Council species to emphasize the unity that humanity was joining. Ambassador Morrison sat at the designated signing table, wearing his formal diplomatic uniform and maintaining the somber expression appropriate for such a momentous occasion. Around him, alien delegates whispered among themselves with obvious satisfaction at the successful conclusion of their pacification efforts. Diplomat Veltron of the Aquatic Nereid Collective swam in her specialized atmospheric tank while addressing the assembled crowd. Today, we witness the final transformation of a warlike species into productive members of galactic civilization. Humanity will serve as an example to future species that violence is not the path to prosperity among the stars. The ceremony proceeded, with speeches from each Council species, all emphasizing the wisdom of peaceful cooperation and the dangers of militaristic thinking. Morrison listened politely to every word, while his cybernetic implant continued recording for later analysis. The aliens' self-congratulatory speeches revealed interesting details about their own military doctrines and strategic assumptions. Ambassador Crixnall of the Plasma Collective delivered the final pre-signing address through the chamber's energy matrix. The human species joins a brotherhood of enlightened civilizations that have learned to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than warfare. Together, we will explore the galaxy's mysteries and build a future based on mutual understanding and shared prosperity. The formal signing was scheduled to begin at precisely 1400 station time, synchronized with similar ceremonies at human colonies throughout Council space. Morrison had been provided with an ornate stylus crafted from rare metals found only in the Zentari home system, a symbolic gesture meant to demonstrate the Council's generosity toward their new junior partners. As the moment approached, Council, Prime Vexithera rose from her position of honor and gestured for Morrison to approach the signing table. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of environmental systems as delegates from across the galaxy prepared to witness humanity's formal submission to Council authority. Ambassador Morrison, Vexithera announced with ceremonial formality, you stand before the assembled representatives of galactic civilization to formalize your species' commitment to peace and cooperation. The pacification accords represent not an ending, but a beginning of humanity's proper role in our great alliance. Morrison stood slowly and walked to the table where the accords waited for his signature. The ornate stylus felt heavy in his hand as he looked down at the document that would supposedly determine humanity's future for generations to come. Around him, alien delegates leaned forward in anticipation of the historic moment. Before I sign this document, Morrison said calmly, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, I believe there is something the Council should see. The unexpected statement sent a ripple of confusion through the assembled delegates. Vexithara's compound eyes fixed on Morrison with sudden intensity as she sensed that something was not proceeding according to plan. Ambassador Morrison, she said sharply, the time for discussion has passed. The accords must be signed immediately to finalize your species' compliance with Council requirements. Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the chamber and activated a small device attached to his wrist. Every display screen in the ceremonial hall suddenly lit up with tactical information that made the alien delegates gasp in shock and disbelief. The screens showed the true disposition of human forces throughout the galaxy, revealing a massive fleet emerging from behind planetary bodies, asteroid fields, and nebula clouds in perfect synchronization. Ships that officially did not exist powered up their engines and weapon systems while targeting computers locked onto Council vessels throughout dozens of star systems. What is the meaning of this deception? Vexithera demanded, her voice rising to a pitch that made several smaller species cover their auditory organs. This, Morrison replied with quiet satisfaction, is humanity's real answer to your ultimatum. The tactical displays updated in real time as Council enforcement fleets throughout the galaxy found themselves suddenly outnumbered by human vessels that had materialized from seemingly empty space. The carefully planned ambush was revealing the true scope of humanity's military capabilities for the first time in their galactic history. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice echoed through the chamber as her image appeared on the main display screen. She spoke from the bridge of the UES Defiance, Earth's newest and most powerful warship, surrounded by officers wearing expressions of grim determination. Representatives of the Galactic Council, Sullivan began with military precision, you made a fundamental error in your assessment of humanity. You assumed our compliance meant weakness. You assumed our cooperation indicated submission. You assumed our willingness to work within your system demonstrated our acceptance of inferior status. You were wrong on every count. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates realized that their carefully orchestrated ceremony had become a public humiliation. The tactical displays showed Council military installations throughout the galaxy under direct threat from human forces that had been positioned, with obvious advanced planning. For 6 months you have watched us surrender ships and weapons, Sullivan continued as the displays showed Council vessels surrounded by superior human numbers. What you witnessed was the most elaborate military deception in galactic history. Every ship you thought you destroyed was worthless. Every weapon you confiscated was obsolete. Every strategic position you thought you controlled was part of our plan. Morrison set down the signing stylus and looked directly at Vexithera. Prime Vexithera, I regret to inform you that humanity respectfully declines to sign your accords. We have a counter-proposal that I think you'll find much more reasonable. The tactical displays surrounding the ceremonial chamber continued updating as the scope of humanity's deception became clear to the stunned Council delegates. What they had believed was empty space throughout the galaxy was suddenly filled with human warships emerging from stealth positions that should have been impossible to maintain. The numbers were staggering, and the implications were terrifying to species that had grown comfortable with their technological superiority. "This is impossible," whispered Ambassador Zil Taco of the diminutive Squeaker Confederacy, his tiny voice barely audible through the translation system. "Our sensors would have detected such a massive fleet presence. No species possesses stealth technology advanced enough to hide entire battle groups from Council monitoring systems." Admiral Sullivan's image on the main display smiled grimly as she gestured toward her tactical officers. "Ambassador Ziltaco, your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect. For 43 years, humanity has been developing technologies that your science considers theoretically impossible. Today you learn what happens when a species approaches problems without the limitations of conventional thinking." The displays zoomed in on specific locations throughout Council space where human forces were revealing themselves with perfect timing. On Zirion, Commander Alex Turner's supposedly surrendered weapons began overloading simultaneously throughout Corvan military installations. The ammunition that humanity had handed over contained remote-activated charges that created massive explosions in weapons depots across the planet. General Kraktar's forces found themselves suddenly surrounded by human soldiers who had been hiding in plain sight as civilian contractors and technical advisors. The weapons the Corvans had received were not only obsolete, but were now actively sabotaging their military infrastructure from within their most secure facilities. "Every weapon you confiscated from us was a Trojan horse," Sullivan explained as the displays showed similar scenes throughout the galaxy. "Every piece of equipment you thought you destroyed contained monitoring devices and remote detonation systems. For 6 months, you have been voluntarily placing our surveillance network throughout your military installations." Dr. Nina Clark's quantum disruptor arrays activated simultaneously across 17 star systems, creating cascading electromagnetic pulses that disabled Council communication networks and defense platforms. The coordinated attack demonstrated a level of technological sophistication that made the assembled delegates question everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Council. Prime Vexithera's compound eyes reflected the tactical displays as she watched her carefully planned enforcement operation collapse in real time. "This level of coordination requires planning that spans decades. How long have you been preparing for this deception?" Morrison stepped forward and clasped his hands behind his back in a gesture that somehow managed to convey both respect and quiet menace. "Prime Vexithara, humanity began preparing for this moment the day we first encountered galactic civilization. We learned very quickly that the Council views newcomers as potential subjects rather than potential equals. We decided to play along until you revealed your true intentions. The revelation that humanity had been planning for this confrontation since first contact sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. Species that had existed for millennia suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered by relative newcomers who had been in space for less than 5 centuries. Ambassador Yershan of the Verdani Collective swayed nervously as her pheromone communications became increasingly frantic. "Your species has violated every principle of the Galactic Accords through this massive deception. The Council will not tolerate such blatant dishonesty from any member species." Sullivan's expression hardened as she leaned forward toward the camera. "Diplomat Yershan, your species has been planning to use humans as agricultural slaves. The Corvans wanted to strip mine our colonies for rare minerals. The Zentari were designing programs to study human psychology for better control techniques. Every Council species saw humanity as a resource to be exploited rather than partners to be respected. The accusations hit their targets with devastating accuracy because Morrison's intelligence gathering had revealed the private conversations where Council species discussed humanity's future with casual cruelty. The aliens' assumption that humans were too primitive to understand their true intentions had led them to speak freely about their exploitation plans. The difference between us and you Morrison added quietly, is that we never lied about our nature. We told you from the beginning that humans fight for what we believe in. You chose to interpret our honesty as a weakness to be corrected rather than a strength to be respected. The tactical displays showed human forces throughout the galaxy taking control of strategic positions with military precision that impressed even their enemies. The coordination required for such a massive operation demonstrated planning capabilities that the Council had grossly underestimated. Captain Lisa Harper appeared on one of the secondary displays as the UES Valor revealed its true armament for the first time. The weapon systems that the Zentari had thought they destroyed were replaced within minutes by modular components that had been hidden throughout the ship's structure. Inspector Quintel, Harper addressed the Zentari officer, who had supervised the ship's disarmament. I hope you enjoyed documenting our decoy weapons. The real armaments are somewhat more impressive than what you cataloged. The Valor's transformation from apparently helpless transport to fully armed dreadnought happened so quickly that the Zentari inspection teams barely had time to realize their mistake before finding themselves prisoners aboard a vessel they had believed was completely disarmed. Throughout Council space, similar scenes played out as human forces revealed hidden capabilities that made their opponents question the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic military doctrine. The humans had not simply hidden ships and weapons. They had created an entirely parallel military infrastructure that operated outside Council detection systems. How many ships do you actually possess? Vexithara asked, her voice containing a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Admiral Sullivan consulted her tactical displays before responding. That information is classified, Prime Vexithara. What I can tell you is that we currently have enough firepower deployed to neutralize every Council military installation in known space within 6 hours. The question now is whether you want to find out exactly how much firepower that represents. The chamber fell silent as the implications of Sullivan's statement sank in. Humanity had not only refused to submit to Council authority, but had demonstrated the capability to enforce their own terms through superior military strength. Morrison picked up the unsigned pacification accords and held them up for all the delegates to see. These accords are based on the assumption that humanity needs the Council more than the Council needs humanity. Recent events suggest that assumption requires revision. He tore the document in half and let the pieces fall to the floor of the ceremonial chamber. Humanity has a counter-proposal that we believe better reflects the current balance of power in our galaxy. I think you'll find our terms much more reasonable than the alternative. The destruction of the Accords marked the end of one era in galactic politics and the beginning of another. The species that had gathered to celebrate humanity's submission now found themselves negotiating the terms of their own survival with the very people they had tried to subjugate. Admiral Kate Sullivan materialized in the ceremonial chamber as human Marines secured Kepler Station with efficiency that impressed even their captives. She walked through the assembled alien delegates with measured steps, her uniform bearing decorations from conflicts that the Council had never known humanity fought. The transformation of the chamber from celebration venue to negotiation site happened so smoothly that it seemed almost choreographed. Sullivan placed a data pad on the table where Morrison had refused to sign the pacification accords and looked directly at Council Prime Vexithara. These are humanity's terms for continued peaceful relations with the Galactic Council. I suggest you review them carefully before responding. Vexithara's compound eyes focused on the data pad with obvious reluctance. Reading the document would acknowledge that the power dynamic had shifted completely, but refusing to read it would leave her ignorant of humanity's demands. After a moment of internal struggle, she activated the pad and began scrolling through terms that made her mandibles click with agitation. This is outrageous, she declared after reading the first section. You are demanding complete restructuring of Council governance, territorial concessions that represent decades of colonial development, and trade privileges that would give humanity effective control over three major shipping routes. Morrison smiled politely and gestured toward the tactical displays that still showed human forces in dominant positions throughout the galaxy. Prime Vex Thara, those terms reflect the current military reality. We are offering you the opportunity to maintain your existing territories and governmental structures in exchange for recognizing humanity as an equal partner rather than a subject species. Ambassador Ziltaco squeaked in protest through his translation device. This is completely unacceptable. Your species has been part of galactic civilization for less than 50 years. You cannot dictate terms to species that were exploring space when your ancestors were still discovering fire. Sullivan turned her attention to the diminutive alien with an expression that made him shrink back in his specialized seating apparatus. Ambassador Ziltaco, your species has been exploring space for 3,000 years and has successfully colonized exactly 7 star systems. Humanity has been spacefaring for less than 5 centuries, and we currently maintain colonies in 42 systems with territorial claims extending to 67 additional worlds. The revelation that humanity had been secretly colonizing worlds far beyond Council space added another layer to the aliens' shock. Every assumption they had made about human capabilities and territorial extent had been completely wrong. How is such expansion possible? Demanded Diplomat Veltran from her aquatic environment tank. Our surveys show no evidence of human presence in those regions. Dr. Nina Clark appeared on one of the secondary displays from her laboratory deep within Cheyenne Mountain. Diplomat Veltran, your surveys detected what our stealth technology allowed them to detect. We have been developing colonization techniques that operate below Council sensor thresholds for over 20 years. The scope of humanity's deception was becoming clear to delegates who had believed they understood the limits of human achievement. Not only had the humans hidden their military capabilities, but they had been conducting massive colonial expansion while maintaining the appearance of a small, contained civilization. Morrison stepped forward and activated a holographic display that showed the true extent of human territory throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council has been operating under the assumption that humanity controls 12 worlds granted by Council Charter. The reality is that we have developed independent colonies throughout this entire galactic arm, many of which possess industrial capabilities that exceed anything in Council space. Captain Lisa Harper joined the conversation from the bridge of the UES Valor, which was now revealing weapon systems that made Council technology look primitive by comparison. We chose cooperation over conquest because we believed in the possibility of peaceful coexistence. Your ultimatum has forced us to demonstrate capabilities we preferred to keep hidden. The tactical implications were staggering. Humanity had not only refused to submit to Council authority, but had revealed the ability to project military power throughout the galaxy from hidden bases that Council intelligence had never detected. What you are demanding amounts to complete surrender, Vexathara protested, while reviewing more sections of humanity's terms. These territorial concessions would leave several Council species without access to critical resources. Admiral Sullivan nodded gravely. Prime Vexithara, the alternative to accepting our terms is discovering exactly how effective human military technology has become when applied with genuine hostile intent. We are offering you the opportunity to maintain your civilizations and your territories. We are not offering you the option to maintain your previous dominance over galactic affairs. The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed the implications of humanity's position. The species that had gathered to witness human submission were now faced with the reality that they had seriously misjudged the balance of power in galactic civilization. Ambassador Crixnall of the Plasma Collective attempted to find middle ground through the energy matrix that served as his communication interface. Perhaps we can negotiate modifications to these terms that address the concerns of all parties involved. Surely some compromise is possible that avoids the need for continued military confrontation. Morrison consulted his own datapad and shook his head. Ambassador Crixnall, humanity spent 43 years attempting to work within the existing council framework. We participated in your diplomatic processes, followed your trade regulations, and contributed to your scientific research programs. In return, you decided that we were too dangerous to be allowed military equality and attempted to reduce us to the status of a client species. Sullivan added her own perspective, while reviewing intelligence reports from human forces throughout the galaxy. Every council species has been planning ways to exploit human resources and territory once our military was eliminated. The Verdani wanted agricultural slaves. The Corvans wanted mining rights, and the Zentari wanted psychological research subjects. None of you considered the possibility that we might object to being carved up among your existing power structures. The accusation hit home because the intelligence gathered during Morrison's diplomatic activities had revealed exactly those kinds of private discussions among council leadership. The aliens' assumption that humans were too primitive to understand sophisticated political maneuvering had led them to speak freely about their exploitation plans. Vexathara finished reading humanity's terms and set down the datapad with obvious reluctance. These demands would fundamentally alter the balance of power that has maintained galactic peace for over 2 millennia. Prime Vexathara, Morrison replied quietly. That balance of power was based on the assumption that new species would accept subordinate status in exchange for access to galactic civilization. Humanity rejects that assumption and has demonstrated the military capability to enforce our rejection. Sullivan received a priority communication through her command implant, and her expression grew serious as she processed the information. Ladies, gentlemen, and representatives of various alien species, we have just received intelligence reports that add urgency to our current negotiations. A new display activated showing long-range sensor data from the galactic rim. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected signs of an extragalactic invasion force approaching our galaxy. The threat appears to be significant enough to require unified response from all spacefaring civilizations in this region. The revelation transformed the entire context of the negotiations. Humanity had demonstrated the capability to dominate existing council forces, but they were also revealing intelligence about threats that the council's own sensors had missed. Morrison looked around the chamber at delegates who were struggling to process the rapid changes in their strategic situation. The choice before the Council is simple. You can accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic defense, or you can continue to view us as a problem to be managed while a real enemy approaches our borders. Vexathara studied the sensor data with growing alarm. How long have you known about this approaching threat? Sullivan smiled grimly. Our monitoring networks detected the first signs 8 months ago. We have been preparing defensive strategies while you were planning our disarmament. Perhaps it is time to admit that the galaxy needs humanity's perspective on military affairs more than humanity needs the Council's permission to exist. The story concluded with Council delegates reluctantly signing humanity's counter-proposal, establishing Earth not just as an equal member, but as the dominant military force in galactic politics. The aliens who had tried to disarm humanity now found themselves relying on human protection against threats they had been too complacent to detect. As the ceremonies ended, Admiral Sullivan met privately with Vexathara, who, despite her species' recent humiliation, approached the human commander with something resembling respect. Admiral Sullivan, Vexathara said carefully, there are greater threats approaching than most council species understand.